Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This story was posted by a user named TinyBirdsNest in the wedding drama subreddit. The post is titled, "Friend having wedding day before mine and kept relationship hidden for a whole year. So I am getting married in a few weeks." About a month ago, one of my best friends, who I've known since college and have kept in regular contact with, dropped the bomb that she was getting married. I didn't even know she was seeing anyone. She then drops the bomb that she's marrying a guy in our friend group and that her wedding is going to have to be the day before mine because her father-in-law can't get time off work at any other time that month. She essentially gave a few other half-assed reasons about why other weekends weren't possible. Some backstory about the person she is marrying: he is someone that we always thought she had a thing for, but she'd always deny it and say she saw him like a brother. We used to argue a bit over her prioritizing him over me back in college, especially because this guy and I didn't really get on much and she and I were so close. After graduating though, I feel like we all matured and put our differences behind us to the point where her husband-to-be was actually invited to my wedding as my friend. My knee-jerk reaction to her telling me she was engaged was crying tears of joy for her. I truly was happy for her, but when I went home to think about it, I felt really icky. All year since I've been wedding planning, she's been asking me really specific questions about my planning process. She complained to me that as my best friend, she didn't feel involved enough in my planning process and said she wanted to come dress shopping with me. But then for her to turn around and tell me that she's been dating this guy on and off for a year while also keeping it a secret makes her feeling left out of my stuff come across as so hypocritical. And then there's the question of why the rush since she's known him a decade, and why specifically my wedding weekend when I sent out my save the dates back in March, so she's had so much time to plan and leave some time in between. It's not about me not having all the attention on me, it's just how can she expect me to be fully present at her wedding, and how selfish she must be to expect me to have to fit her into an already stressful weekend for me. When I told her this, she doubled down on that weekend being the only one available and that she specifically chose that one because she knew I'd be available since I'd booked a few days off from work before the wedding and that she needed me at her wedding. She said I would embarrass her around her future in-laws since she made such a point of needing to pick a date that I could attend. I then expressed how upset I was that she kept the relationship hidden from me, to which she said she thought I'd cut her off because of my history not getting along with this guy. Again, we all moved past that stuff years ago and are a far cry from the kids we were when we all met back in freshman year. When I told her I didn't think I could make her wedding, she was so upset that she cried and said she never thought I'd do that to her and skip her wedding. She's been telling other friends in the friend group that I'm coming to the wedding when they've asked if that date is doable for me. We haven't spoken since my conversation about how upset I was with her a month ago. I'm not trying to be a bridezilla, and I know people are entitled to be private. This is where I now need advice. I feel so bitter and like the whole friendship was a lie. I can't make it to her wedding, and honestly, having her at mine feels disingenuous. Is it rude for me not to go to her wedding? Should I go to her wedding since this is a decade-long friendship? Part of me wants to disinvite her and her husband-to-be from my wedding because of the lies. Is that rude? Is there a polite way to disinvite someone from your wedding without coming across as an absolute villain? Thank you for reading up to here if you have. User Stress 78 said, "It is not rude to not go to her wedding. I would never expect a friend to make my wedding if it were the day before hers, regardless of any other weirdness or drama." To this user ad Euphoric said, "These were my first thoughts, and second are that she wanted to be first." This comes across as one-upping the original poster. I wonder if this friend likes to be the center of attention. I personally would not go, and I would also not be interested in a friendship with someone who intentionally planned a wedding the day before mine, because it's most likely a deliberate attempt to deflect attention from your big day. User Independent Prior said, "Friendship issues aside, how incredibly entitled and tone-deaf of her to expect you to go to her wedding the day before yours. You will have too much to do. Likewise, I think it's equally idiotic of her to expect that she will have time to attend a wedding the day after hers. Don't go to hers and don't expect her at yours. Both ideas are ridiculously unrealistic." Update: a few people in the original post were asking about rehearsal dinners and all of that stuff. I'm Middle Eastern and we don't really do that in our culture. Some people also said I needed to get over myself and that I don't own the whole weekend, which is true, I don't. My issue was the lying and also the expectation for me to drive a total of 5 hours the day before my wedding and to attend another when I had so many things to finalize. I also just needed to vent. Being lied to and having something that felt so calculated happen in what I thought was one of my closest friendships is strange. Oh, and I don't think it was a shotgun wedding, which a lot of people were suggesting. Anyway, I had my wedding, it was perfect, and I wouldn't change a thing. I didn't go to her wedding, I genuinely didn't have the time. I did see some posted videos of her wedding. She didn't copy mine, which a lot of people were worried about considering she had been asking me about all of my prep. I'll give her credit though, her wedding was gorgeous, but definitely not a 2-month planned wedding like she was making out it was to me. In the end, she ended up coming to my wedding about 3 hours late. I was too busy being in my own newly married bubble to notice her or anything, but I did get feedback from people who were sat at her table. Like, people said she would in my original post, she spent the whole time talking about her wedding. In our culture, the bride receives a heavy piece of gold jewelry at her wedding. She made a show of having her new husband take her piece of jewelry out of her bag and putting it on her at the table just after my husband and I did our outfit change. She was also showing off other pieces of jewelry she received, making a point to emphasize that she received real sapphires and real diamonds. Her and her husband also spent the whole time texting each other, which means that they were probably saying not very nice things that they didn't want our mutual friends overhearing, and she frequently would turn to him and say, "Don't worry, we're leaving soon." They were also packing on the PDA with neck kisses. She also then cried to my mom and brother about how she doesn't understand why I've not been talking to her and how I've been so cold to her. This wasn't true. I'd only told her how much her actions and lies had hurt me, and to be honest, she was the one who didn't respond to my last message. My mum, being the classic mum she is, brought her to me and tried to make us hug it out. We had this very awkward exchange caught on camera. My mum did tell my friend that she shouldn't have lied to me for a whole year though, so it's nice to know she had my back even if she pulled a typical mum move trying to make everyone happy. Our mutual friends are all on my side. No one really thinks she's in the right. Most of them didn't go to her wedding. With the invites being so last minute and her wedding being on a weekday, a lot of people couldn't get the time off or childcare. No one else knew about the wedding, which is crazy. I do believe that her truth is that she doesn't think she's done anything wrong, and she really does think that she considered me and my situation in her wedding planning. Unfortunately, I think it's one of those friendships where we no longer really align, and I have taken a step back and distanced myself from her. I do appreciate that she came to my wedding, however, I think she did it to make a point more than out of the goodness of her heart and respect for our friendship, considering what she pulled. This next post was made in the TIFU subreddit by a user named Origile. The post is titled, "I lost my entire life savings of over 600k to a rapidly developed gambling addiction and not being able to afford the taxes I now owe." This may be a lengthy story as I'm going to outline how this happened from the bliss my life was before through the descent into chaos and where I am now. I had at one point amassed over 500 ki in a retirement account with over 100 grand in cash in my checking account. To start, many of you will immediately wonder how I even got in that situation. So let me give a little backstory. I'm an information technology professional with a background in software engineering, although currently in management. I make 6 figures and have since I was in my late 20s. I'm generally frugal, save way more than the average person, and don't buy a lot of lavish things. I keep to myself most of the time, go out on occasion, and buy quality on the things I use the most, but don't overindulge. Doing this has led to a happy and generally successful life where I never had to worry about losing my job for even a year, much less where my next meal was coming from. I always knew that if shit really hit the fan, I had enough money to survive for years. I've always enjoyed the occasional casino trip, probably more than my friends, but it was never really a problem. That is, until mid last year. I was a casual gambler playing mostly parlor table games when one day I went to the casino with $600 and sat down at an Ultimate Texas Hold'em game where I proceeded to win nonstop for hours. I continuously upped my bets and kept winning. Eventually, I was betting table max. The table was drawing attention, I was on a high. Everybody was winning and I was winning the most. A straight followed by a full house, followed by another straight and another full house. Shit, I was playing max bets, raising my bet 4x blind, and would still win. Sometimes only with a high card. I could not lose. The table was all cheering me on because when I'd win another $2,000 or so, I'd toss $100 in chips to the others at the table as a kind gesture. The largest chips they had at the table were $500 chips. They ran out and had to order a refill. This happened 6 times. 6 times they ran out of money for the players at our table and had to keep bringing more in. To avoid too much attention, I would shove the $500 chips into my pocket and play only with the ones on the table. Any new winnings went into my pocket out of sight. At one point, they decided to change the cards, which takes about 20 minutes, so I got up to go to the bathroom. I thought my pants were gonna sag from the weight of the chips. They filled my pockets so much I worried they might just spill out of my pockets. I later found out that the pit bosses were getting calls from security asking them to keep an eye on me because they were suspicious that I might be cheating, and they said the security reviewed the footage of that night for days afterward, trying to see what was going on. When I finally stood up from the table, I had won over $30,000 from my original $600 buy-in. That was a high I didn't know was possible. I could buy a car with that or anything I wanted really, but then I already could. There was nothing I wanted that I couldn't already have bought. The $30,000 didn't matter. I found out later that because I was betting so much for so long, my tier status went to the highest level, and that came with tons of perks like a free cruise, free golf trips at a local private club, and over $3,000 in food comps which were valid at even the fancy casino restaurants like their steakhouse. With nothing I wanted to spend the money on, I decided to go back again the next weekend. This time I played slots and table games, all sorts of things, and again won more. Everything I touched won. Slots were paying me hand pays right and left. People recognized me from before and would stop to hear the story. I won another $20,000 over the course of the month, mostly on slots with bets ranging from $5 to $60 a spin. It was all cash, literal paper cash in my closet in $10,000 bundles, just sitting there with no purpose other than to be used on more casino trips. My friends all told me how lucky I was and loved to tell the story. It's fun to tell stories about sticking it to the casino. Everybody loves a good winner story. My friends all knew I had nearly $50,000 in cash in my closet. I had just bought a house and started fixing things up. I spent about $50,000 on the house covering paint, appliances, flooring, etc. When I spent that money though, I was careful to use my card and save the cash for future casino trips. In the weeks that followed, I'd slowly lose more and more of that $50,000 wad of cash. It became $40,000, then $35,000, and I kept thinking, oh shit, if my friends ask to see the cash, I'm going to need an excuse for why I don't have it anymore. I should probably try to win some back at the tables again, which I know just as well as you do now that this is a ridiculously stupid thing to even think, much less attempt. Eventually, my mom would fly into town to visit me. She lives in a state without casinos and enjoys going as well. She mentioned over and over how she couldn't wait to go to the casino and see how lucky I am. I had to make up an excuse for why I didn't have all the money I had talked about in my stories. I felt guilty and dirty lying about something as trivial as losing $15,000, but I didn't want anybody to know I gave some back like an idiot. Caving into this feeling of shame and accepting my willingness to hide it would ultimately be my downfall. After my mother left, I had no other people to be accountable to. The casino offered me $250 every week and $250 every weekend in free play. I proceeded to go back to the casino twice a week, of course to collect the free play, but with my betting habits of occasionally betting $10 to $50 a spin, that amount of money could last anywhere from 3 minutes to literal seconds. Once it was gone, I'd be at the cashier asking for money because I'm withdrawing $3,000 at a time, an amount the ATM machines didn't allow me to take. I lost the money over and over, week after week, losing $3,000 or even $10,000. One day I saw my banking app note, "You spent $30,000 less so far this month than last month." And my heart sank. I knew I needed to stop, and I would. I just needed to bet bigger and have one of those good days to get me up maybe $20,000 to $30,000 out of my now missing $60,000 to $80,000, and I just cut my losses there. This logic carried me for months as I spiraled. I stopped going to the casino altogether and the allure eventually faded. A few months later, I discovered online casinos. I thought they were all illegal or didn't accept US customers until I found one that did. I deposited a few $100 and was able to play slots and table games while lying down in bed at night. The convenience of depositing money straight from my bank account effectively straight into a slot machine was just so easy. Too easy. I eventually lost everything I had in my savings account. I felt empty. I felt nothing. What's another 10K at this point? Thoughts started creeping in. I used a credit card to see if it would even work, and to my disappointment, it did. I ran up the limit on my credit card, hoping to win enough to pay it back off. When I reached the max, I requested a limit increase, which was granted, then ran it up again. Out of sources of money, I decided to withdraw funds from my Roth IRA into my personal account. The wire took less than 20 minutes the first time. I felt guilty. I felt a rush of anxiety and thrill as I then immediately deposited that money into the online casino. I turned 10K into zero in a matter of hours. I started depositing increments of 1K because that was reasonable and less money, but I'd lose it and do it again minutes later, again, reasonable small increment. When bills came due, I didn't have the money for them, so I justified another withdrawal from my retirement account. This time it was to pay bills, so I need this. I'd withdraw way more than I needed for the bills and blow the rest. During all of this, there were, of course, moments where I turned 100 into 20K or 1K into 10K in minutes as well. It wasn't all losses, which is what kept me hooked. If I could turn 100 into 20K, just think about what I could do with 1K. I could get it all back. I kept withdrawing money from my retirement account until I had withdrawn so much that the amount left would no longer even cover the taxes I now owed on the income and penalties incurred from early withdrawals from my retirement account. I was so ashamed that I didn't want anybody to know about any of this. I told no one. My closest friends are all wealthy like I was, but without a gaping hole in their bank accounts. It got harder and harder to keep up with going out to eat and going golfing, etc. My new house doesn't have basic furniture required to host guests, no large sofa, no reasonable dining table. It grew increasingly difficult to justify to all my friends why I haven't had anyone over and why I haven't bought a couch or even basic furniture. The crippling guilt and anxiety over my looming tax obligation forced me to come clean to my best friend. I feel bad for having not said something sooner. It could have saved my future. I'm still reeling in shock over what I've done. It all happened over the course of a single year, with the bulk of it occurring in the last 6 months. I've since stopped entirely. I've got my budget back on track and have a plan for covering taxes and moving on with my life. Talking to my friend about it put everything into perspective. In hindsight, I feel like I was in a massively depressed fog, not thinking clearly and not caring about my own well-being. It all happened so fast. I will be dealing with the fallout from this for the rest of my life, but the next few months and years will likely be the most difficult as I pay off all the debt I've foolishly accrued and try to get my life back together. I hope this post serves as a reminder to everyone not to gamble at all, because winning might be the worst thing that happens to you. User Zephyr Sehia said, "For once, a real honest-to-God sorry man, gambling addiction is brutal. The casino always wins in the end." To this user do interview said, "That's the ultimate truth about gambling. The house always wins." There was another popular post about one dude who lost all his inheritance and dipped into his personal savings, upwards of 600K, on Wall Street bets. Now I can understand the allure, it's got a high. User Awaystock said, "This is a great explanation of how casinos and gambling companies make money. They get a few people hooked and then take all their money. People think that lots of people gamble and each lose a little, and that's how they make money. But it's really this story here. Casinos and other gambling companies make big money by taking everything from a few people." User Elegant Echoes said, "It's honestly sickening how the casinos can sink their teeth into the gamblers, manipulative tactics and feedback loops without any measures taken to ensure someone can't be irresponsible. It's clear to everyone that those measures would be needed, but it would lose the money, so it'll never happen." This third and final post was made in the relationship advice subreddit by a throwaway account. The post is titled, "Wife and I ran into her ex at the mall and it sent me for a loop. I've never done anything like this before. I created a new account because I don't know where this is going, if it's even going anywhere. My wife and friends know my Reddit username. Maybe I'm overthinking it, maybe not. but something about this past weekend is just sitting weird with me, and I don't know if I should trust my gut or if I'm just getting in my own head. For some context, my wife Carla and I have been together for 4 years and married for 5 months. We have a solid relationship, with no real trust issues or anything like that. She's an amazing person and I love her endlessly. Something important to this situation is that she's always been one of those people who holds grudges forever. She's still mad about a girl stealing her seat in 9th grade. If you cross her, she holds it against you forever. I think that's what makes this whole thing feel off. We were out shopping on Saturday at a mall about an hour from home. At this point, the day was winding down and we were grabbing a bite to eat in the food court when we ran into Chris. Now, Chris is the ex. She was with him from age 16 to 24. He's the only ex she ever really talks about, and every time she has, it's been something negative. They fought a lot. They had a messy breakup. They were toxic. They cheated on each other, the whole 9 yards. We've lived in the same city as him our whole relationship, and other than a brief blip while dating, we've never once bumped into him. But we ran into him an hour away from home on a random day at the mall, and her reaction just sent me for a loop. I was mid-sentence when I saw her eyes lock onto something behind me, and immediately she lit up. Big smile. Before I even turned to see who it was, she was already standing up to greet him, just beaming. They hugged, not just some quick "oh hey" hug. It felt like a "so amazing to finally see you again" hug. Suddenly, I was just standing there, completely shut out of the conversation while they started catching up. I didn't even know who he was. I hadn't seen him in years and had to piece it together as they chatted. I thought she'd introduce me, but nope. I was just standing there while she laughed, fully engaged with him, even some physical touching. I'm not a jealous person, and I honestly have zero problem with her being friends with whomever she chooses. But my impression of her relationship with him was different from what I was seeing. I figured I was overreacting or reading too much into it, but I still felt a bit weird, like a third wheel if I'm being honest, so I tried to hint that it was time to go by picking up our trays and making it clear I was ready. Neither of them noticed. So I walked off, tossed the trays, and came back, still talking. They finally wrapped it up after a few more minutes. They hugged again, and then he was off. Without a single word about it, she just looked at me and said, "Okay, let's stop at Lululemon and Indigo before we head out," like nothing happened. I kept waiting for her to bring him up, say something about how weird it was, or at least acknowledge him or their conversation in some way, but she just acted like it was nothing. We shopped for another 45 minutes as if nothing had happened. Once we got in the car, I waited to see if she'd bring it up. She didn't. Small talk died off a few minutes after we got on the highway, and she was just glued to her phone. So I asked who she was texting. She said it was the group chat. I said, "What's the topic of conversation?" She smiled and said, "I'm telling them how crazy it is that I ran into Chris." I just replied, "Yeah, that was pretty wild." She agreed and said, "Insane. What are the chances?" And then she just kept texting. I kind of expected that to kick off our conversation about it, but it didn't. That night at home, after she'd been on her phone for the majority of the night with the girls still chatting about it, I decided to bring it up. I told her I felt like a bit of a third wheel when Chris showed up since she didn't introduce me. It felt like I wasn't even there because she didn't introduce me. She lightheartedly said, "Oh, he knows who you are," and then gave me a quick peck on the cheek. Now, I didn't exactly handle this well. I brought it up in a very lighthearted and non-serious tone. That's just how I deal with conflict, so it's 100% on me for not communicating where my head was at, and I can't fault her for being so nonchalant about it. I left it there for the night and thought I'd take another stab at it the next day once I'd had some time to process. But it's been days and I still just feel really confused about this whole thing. I'm really struggling to process how I'm feeling about it all and judging whether I even have a right to feel upset. I have never run into an ex before, so this is new territory, so I'm making my first Reddit post. Honestly, I'm not even sure if this is the best subreddit for this. If you think this belongs elsewhere, let me know. Update. Hi again, everyone. I wasn't sure if I should make a whole new post or edit and add here, but considering how many people commented update me, I think posting a brief update here makes the most sense. Carla and I sat down and had a long talk. She was experiencing emotions similar to mine throughout the week. How can that be, you might ask? After sitting down and using a lot of the top comments here as a guideline to get my feelings out, namely the feeling of being lost and confused, we were able to get a dialogue going and figure out my and our feelings. The biggest realization I had while replying to comments, and what was fully realized when Carla and I talked, was that I felt abandoned and disconnected from her for the first time in our relationship. We have a little phrase we say book page to signify that our minds, emotions, and hearts are on the same page. We say it a lot because that's just how we feel. When Chris and Carla split at the mall and she just didn't acknowledge it or give any indication she was ready to sync up our emotions and experiences from that encounter, that's what really threw me for a loop and had me spiraling for days. She knew it was a mistake on her part and had every intention of talking to me and getting back on the same page. She was actually the one to initiate our talk when she got home yesterday. I was planning to wait until later after eating, but she kicked it off almost immediately. She was and is incredibly sorry for how I was feeling. She didn't realize it was as severe as it was, which is why she had put off talking until she had figured her own feelings out. I can already predict the comments rolling in saying we're both bad communicators and that we both did the same unhealthy thing of bottling up our feelings instead of just talking to our spouse. If that were the norm, I would completely agree with you. This is the first time I've ever experienced this feeling, as I've said, and it's the first time Carla has done this as well. This was an outlier, not the normal rhythm of our relationship. As soon as we were able to talk about our thoughts, those feelings of disconnection went away, and it immediately felt like a million-pound weight had been lifted off my heart. We then started to compare our experiences, what happened, and our thoughts and feelings. We went over a lot, so I'm going to just throw things out in point form because the conversation jumped around a lot. Carla feels a fun throwback type of excitement when talking with Chris and reminiscing about high school and old times. He added her on Instagram that night after they ran into each other at the mall. She added him back and they started messaging. He had broached the idea of meeting up for coffee to catch up when they were talking at the mall. She said she might be open to it but didn't commit at that point. She talked to the girls in the group chat because they were all there during the Chris era and had discussed in the past what meeting up with him again would be like. I told her I tried to check her phone to ease my anxiety, and she said she was sorry the password had changed. She changed it due to a misunderstanding with an instruction from her new Works Mail app. She reorganized her phone passcode from my birth year, her birth year, and our meeting year to our meeting year, my birth year, and her birth year. She had changed it around November or December, and I just haven't had a need to touch her phone to try and get in. She handed me her phone and let me enter the new code to show me she was being honest. The girls' group chat was full of girl talk. A couple of people reached out to me via direct message that I've already shared details with, and a few of them said this girl's chat was extremely inappropriate and not okay, while others said it resembled what their girls' chat would look like under the same circumstances and with all the same history and context. Carla does still have some lingering feelings for Chris. It's not something that she feels detracts from or impacts her feelings for me at all. She was brutally honest and said it's more of a physical and lust attraction, not feelings of love. Carla has a very dominant and assertive personality type, and so does Chris. They never worked as a couple for that reason, but they connected physically really well. Our relationship works the opposite way, and she knows that I'm the puzzle piece for her heart and soul. No matter anything else, she wants to spend her life with me, and I feel the same way about her. A lot of the girls' group chat dove into some details about my and Carla's sex life as well as her history with Chris. I learned some things in the chat that Carla had hinted at before in conversations or while being intimate that made things make a lot more sense. I can provide some additional details if people want, but I don't think that's really the point here. Carla said she wanted to meet up with Chris for coffee. She messaged him with me at the end of our talk, and they confirmed for today. It's 1:22 p.m. here. They met up for coffee at 11 a.m. I checked in with her, and she said it's going really well. I'm sure there are questions that have come up that I haven't answered. These details are the ones that come to mind when I sit and think about our talk and where we're at. User Daydreamer said, listen, you really need to start communicating your feelings to your wife. I get that it's hard for you, but that's something that you need to work super hard on improving. Without good communication, relationships won't last. You won't vocalize your feelings and the resentment will just build. Tell her that this mall trip left you confused. You thought she didn't like the guy, she only spoke of him in a negative light, and then it looked like she met a long-lost best friend and spent a whole evening talking about it to her mates. Tell her that was confusing and makes it look like such a big deal. Why was it such a big deal? Does she still have some sort of feeling for him? Also, doesn't she think that's kind of rude not to introduce you and bring you into a conversation? That's universally rude, whomever you are meeting. Ask her all this. User Professional Belt said, if someone comes up to you while you're with someone else and you don't introduce them, that's bad social form, period. It doesn't matter if it's your soccer coach and your mom, unless it's a super brief interaction like a passing hello. That's just a rude way to behave. That rule goes double if it's an ex. It goes from rude to disrespectful. Your wife should have immediately introduced you and included you in the conversation. If she's touching someone, it should have been you. When she didn't introduce you, the subtext is that you aren't worth being introduced to. Even if it had been someone you had met before, the polite thing to do is say, oh hey, do you remember OP, my husband? Or have you met before? This is really basic social etiquette that every adult should know. User Gino Flower said, so it's been 4 years since they ended. I can see being friendly if you see an ex after this long, especially in public after you've noticed that they've noticed that you've noticed each other, but she should have introduced you and been very intentional about it. Chris, this is my husband, Bob Jones. Bob, this is Chris Smith. Her not doing that makes you seem unimportant and leaves you out of the conversation. It's rude. Maybe she was just surprised, but she's an adult and should know to introduce people. As for the rest, with her texting her friends, I would have totally done the same, but probably later on. You have to start using your words though. You have feelings and are allowed to voice them. If you have something to say it in the way you mean it and feel it. You're doing no one any favors by trying to make light of things or skimming over them. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video, and thank you also to partner of the channel, Gamersubs. Use code DLAM to support the channel and get 10% off of your purchase, link in the description. I'm sure many of you like me have a hankering for daily caffeine, so go check them out. Lately, I've been a big fan of Titty Milk and Acid Rain, but they've got dozens of other flavors for y'all to try out. Anyway, thanks again for reaching the end, and I hope you all have an amazing passage of the next 24 hours.